Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Richard. How are you?
I'm wonderful. It's my birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday. How could I not remember? Do you have any big plans? What are the plans for the weekend?
Yeah, we're having people over this afternoon, so yeah, just getting ramped up for that and enjoying the quiet morning before the chaos ensues.
Well, let me ask you this. First, on behalf of everybody, happy birthday. But how
Thank
do
you.
you like to celebrate your birthday? Is it a time that you find personal or do you like sharing it with others?
Ordinarily I don't like a big noisy celebration, but I do like having the people that I love around me. So yeah, I would say that I'm going to take the introvert answer to that question.
Let's wrap up recording because you need to go and have a blast of a time with everyone. So
Yeah.
how was the week? This week was graduation week for me. My daughter graduated yesterday and she graduated kindergarten. And it's one of those things where growing up, I didn't have all these mini graduations in school. You had like these big graduations, right? And I was thinking, why do you need all of these graduations? She just left preschool and she graduated preschool
Hmm.
last year and now she's graduating kindergarten. And in the moment when she's on stage and I see this massive grin on her face and she's so proud of herself, I'm like, okay, how can I not want this for her? Of course, she can enjoy this moment. So it was an amazing week. It was an amazing day. I'm excited that she's going into grade one.
Well, my 27-year-old stepson, has just graduated from law school. So yeah, it's a good time for a lot of people. We're on opposite ends of the spectrum.
We are. And also a big week for news. We had some major announcements this week, but what I'll do, I'll kind of throw out some stories that are top of mind for me, and then we can
Hmm.
discuss them. I think right now we're on the eve of Apple's event next week. So we saw Microsoft build, we saw Google I/O, we saw OpenAI have their spring updates, and the sleeping giant. Now it's Apple's
Hmm.
turn. And so for you, when you think of what Apple needs to present next week, how do they make their case that they have been preparing all this time for consumers in AI?
Well, let's be clear. What Apple have always done is not necessarily led the conversation, but they've been really good at taking what is emerging as technology and turning it into something quite special. They certainly weren't the first people to invent a
Right.
smartphone. They certainly weren't the first people to have handheld or even tablets, but they have been very good at taking the idea that is emerging and turning it into something that's truly interesting and valuable for the consumer. So I think that's what I'm looking out for. Do they still have the Apple magic where they can take something that is either considered somewhat mundane or utilitarian and turn it into something that is a sex symbol, that's awesome, that feels
Yeah.
that it might even be part of your identity. A lot of pundits say that if you carry around an iPhone, you're basically celebrating the fact that you're cool and interesting and much more fun than an Android carrier. But I think that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, do they still have that magic that they can sprinkle over what is currently, you know, and somewhat interesting consumer space, but certainly nothing has come out that will get our attention. We saw some pretty broken launches from
Yeah.
Humane. That's kind of the pin technology just doesn't seem to be landing the way that they thought it would be. And having said that, Apple have had some false starts. They certainly swung and missed on the car. They
Right.
swung and missed on the Vision Pro. I don't think that that's kind of landed the way that they thought it would. Um,
Agreed.
so yeah, I think most of these companies do have opportunities to try new things. I mean, Amazon's had a lot of swings or chances at bat and missed as well. I think the Fire phone, even the Fire
Yeah.
TV, is not that great.
Yeah.
Um, but I think a lot of that's and as you know, I'm a huge fan of experimentation, and I think that all product companies should be taking swings at bat, especially when you've got billions of dollars worth of a war chest in your war
Yeah.
chest to be able to do
Yeah.
that. I think these companies owe it to their shareholders to spend that money on R&D to figure out what's next, to try new things. So really, as much as the car and the Vision Pro haven't been the things that they were expected to be, I'm also excited that they're doing those things. I'm excited that they're trying. I'm excited that they're, being adventurous and leaning into these things. So, yeah, I'm looking for that fairy dust. I want to see the special Apple magic come to a space that for consumers has been, pretty hit and miss so far.
I like that. So I do agree to a large extent. I'll tell you what struck me. Last night, I was scrolling through Reddit and I saw an ad for WWDC. And I thought to myself, wow, I remember the days when people would be lining up for a WWDC event, probably like people are lining up for an NVIDIA event nowadays, right? And you'd never see Apple really advertising that, hey, we're having an event, you should come and join us, because everybody already knew that. And I think it says so much about how times have changed and the position that Apple is in right now, where they need to be driving eyeballs and the conversation through paid marketing and advertising. And to your point, I do think they have an opportunity because nobody has really cracked the consumer side of AI. Maybe OpenAI is pushing the envelope with their multimodal models, but Google certainly hasn't shown how AI on device, whether it's their Pixel or their Chromebooks. Microsoft has shown how Copilot could be integrated, but again, that's more on the work side, the productivity side.
Yeah.
I will be really curious to see what Apple brings to the table that doesn't feel gimmicky. I do think like Siri, if they can fix Siri, a million people rejoice, right? Like
just a billion people.
True, right? Just to make Siri better at understanding context and conversations. But I do think a lot of the challenges that we have with smartphones and how it has integrated into our lives, they also have the opportunity to start addressing those. Can they help us to use AI to reduce screen time and dependency looking at a device, right? I don't think they need to do much, but if they do little and do it really well, as you're saying, sprinkle that magic to make it feel like, oh, wow, I can separate this technology away from my life and be more present. Solutions like that could really help.
Yeah, I think you're right on all accounts. Certainly, when a company starts advertising, a company the size of Apple, you start to question whether they actually know what they're doing anymore. It's normally a leading indicator that they're struggling. But I think you're right. We should give them the benefit of the doubt. They've done amazing stuff in the past. Let's go in there with a lot of curiosity and see what happens. Should be a good event. Hot on the heels of that event in San Francisco will be Config, which is Figma's big event. This is a sold-out event as well. For those of you who are not designers, Figma is kind of the big 800-pound gorilla in the product design or digital design space. Certainly for hardcore designers, not in the same league as Canva in terms of size, but certainly in terms of depth of use and kind of the rabid fan level of design excitement that designers have. And what I'm really curious about is that I noticed that their agenda changed quite significantly from the beginning of the year. At the beginning of the year, they had a lot more diverse tracks. It now seems that there are 2 days and almost 2 tracks. The first day entirely dedicated to AI, and the second day dedicated to design systems. Those two things ultimately, as we've discussed in the past, will merge. As you know, I've got full disclaimer, I've got a foot squarely in the camp of the design systems world through my relationship with Knapsack. This is an enterprise design system platform. But we're already starting to see those AI features emerging from, even an enterprise environment. Again, very B2B, very work focused, very productivity focused. We're not quite there yet in terms of the promise of AI. Certainly won't be for some time still. But it's very interesting that the agenda changed. So even in the space of just a couple of months, we saw that agenda reforming. So I'll be at Config in a couple of weeks, and I will certainly be reporting back from there.
Awesome. I think it's really interesting because this is also the first major event that Figma is going to have since the dissolution of their acquisition by Adobe, right? And so I think there are going to be a lot of eyes on them. Knapsack, I believe, has been at the forefront of driving like design system integration within your workflow. And so eyes are on Figma. They're obviously going to make a big play with AI and with design systems. And we're going to be interested to see that. And I guess to Apple's point, the thing they have to solve for is just being relevant, because it feels like so much of this is happening outside of their control and input, right? Like people are building these AI solutions and they're going to run on top of Macs and Windows devices. And so it'll be super interesting to just see how each of these companies now bring their best advantage forward and continue innovating and doing what they do best. But yes, if you're a product leader, a designer, definitely connect with Richard. If you're in the area, you'll have a blast.
Yeah, lots going on this in a couple of weeks. So, I think to that point, one of the things that we need to realize from a strategic argument point of view is the idea that first movers always have an advantage. And we've now found over the years that that's not entirely true. Google was certainly not the first to search. In fact, I think they were like, the seventh or eighth or ninth solution that came along in that time. So you don't have to be first to be the best. NVIDIA certainly weren't the first chip maker. In fact, I think they were kind of late to the game, not entirely late to the game, but they certainly took a long time to get their momentum. So it's easy to say, hey, Apple's falling behind, but I don't really see that. This is a multi-trillion-dollar company with a massive war chest with probably one of the most recognizable brands in the world. Don't write them off just yet.
Okay, so then let's talk about it then, right? Because NVIDIA this week, well, on Sunday technically, they had Computex in Taiwan, and for those that don't know, Computex is like the chip conference, the major chip conference each year. All the chip providers, Intel, AMD, they all are attending, all the fab makers, and they're kind of parading their vision for their technology, the progress that they're making, etc. Right? And so NVIDIA does this keynote at 7 p.m. and it's fully sold out. And there's this moment that is captured on camera where Jensen Huang is surrounded by people trying to get his autograph, taking his picture. And this lady asked him to sign her dress right at the top on her chest. And I'm thinking, wow, this is a chip company at a chip conference, and the CEO is being celebrated as if he's a rock star, right? And I wonder how much personality plays a role in modern companies like an NVIDIA, because I just don't see a Tim Cook pulling that off with his personality and getting this cult following that you saw with like a Steve Jobs or with an Elon Musk. And even with the Zuckerbergs of the world, it does seem like CEOs require this present in the media personality. You see that with Sam Altman, where they're always in front of the camera. They're talking, they're telling their story themselves versus it being from corporate PR speak. And it feels like the Googles of the world, the Apples of the world are kind of one generation behind, and the excitement just hasn't followed them. But on the heels of all of that, this is what happened. So NVIDIA, the stock took off again, as it has been all year, and it's passed Apple in terms of market cap. And so it's now valued at, I think, $3.019 trillion. Apple is like $2.99 trillion. And so it's the second most valuable US company in the world by market cap, which is incredible. This year alone, it's up like, I think, 147%. It's an amazing growth story. But it is just fascinating to see where both companies stand on the heels of an event like WWDC next week.
Yeah, look, to the first point about cult of personality, this is a critical part of the modern era's both company identity and also communication strategies. The reason why that exists at all is because we have become a society that's very, very suspicious, sus, as the kids would say, of PR and corporate speak and marketing speak. And so they really want the person who is in charge of the company to come forward and have both the authority, but also the responsibility and the accountability to say the things that they want to say. I've heard this term, the throat to choke, the single throat to choke. It's a terrible term, but you kind of get the idea. Putting the leader of a company out in the front is necessary. It's a part of
Yeah.
in the society that we've created. We don't really trust people anymore because of all the shit that people like Zuckerbergs and
Yeah.
Sandbergs did.
Yeah.
It was all corporate speak, and then it turned out that it was all lies, and
Exactly.
they knew that bad things were happening, and they were deliberately covering them up with PR. In fact, I believe at one point Facebook had something like 1,800 people in the PR department really
Wow.
just kind of spinning stories. That's 1,800 is bigger than most companies. So you can just see how much spin was going on there. I think in the point of like the valuation, again, I'm going to stand by what I said the last couple of weeks. I think NVIDIA is creating a bit of a bubble. I just don't see the connection between that market cap and the revenues associated with that. Now, if you can show me an example where a company has been able to deliver on that kind of thing, I might say, yeah, but it is currently overvalued and it needs to correct at some point. And I think that what's happening is we're getting this ripple effect to other companies where they release earnings and companies or the market saying, oh, well, you don't have NVIDIA type earnings, so we're going to beat you down. Salesforce is a really good example of that. They came out with their earnings. They missed their earnings by fractions. I mean, it was like a small amount, and yet they got completely hammered. It was like a 21% drop in share price overnight.
Yeah.
Because the market's now, looking at companies like NVIDIA and Microsoft and saying, why don't you have growth like that? I honestly, would bet on Facebook because Facebook has got incredible fundamentals. They've been hitting the mark time and time again for 2 decades now.
Yeah.
And I think they'll bounce back. So I think it's important for us not to just look at these numbers and get starry-eyed. The reality is that the revenues are just not there to prop up these fundamental, to prop up these valuations. So I'm as usual an optimist about the industry and a pessimist about these individual stocks.
I think NVIDIA is in this really interesting position because the facts support them, right? They're selling chips as fast as they can manufacture them. And listening to AMD, listening to Intel, ARM, whether you're on the CPU side, the GPU side, or somewhere in between, it feels like everyone is 3 to 5 years behind NVIDIA in terms of being able to offer solutions that can compete. And the moat that NVIDIA has built in terms of CUDA and the entire architecture that they're offering to developers, it's going to take a lot. It's going to take deliberate effort and a lot for companies to kind of break through that, because again, they have to keep the speed up to stay on track with everybody else. Do you say, hey, you know what, we're going to slow down, we're going to rewrite our entire stack in this open source language, or are we going to just use what all engineers coming in already know that allows us to move faster? And so they're in this really unique position where they're in demand. Like, it doesn't matter what analysts thought. They're selling more than people think that they're going to sell each quarter. But to your point, the numbers for them to justify the valuation will need to be ridiculous. There was this comparison that somebody had with Apple, where they were looking at their revenue per share and saying one is either undervalued or the other is really overvalued, right? You decide. And when you compare the numbers, the sheer numbers in terms of what Apple is delivering in terms of sales and revenue compared to what NVIDIA is, it's night and day. And of course, people will say, well, the market is rewarding potential for growth potential versus actual revenue.
So I think this is where we've made a mistake in the past, right? This is where my old, gray hair from the .com and from crypto comes back and says, hey, just remember that potential is an idea. It's not a fact. And, just like your daughter graduating or my son graduating this last week, that's exciting. We believe that they are moving on to wonderful things. It is absolutely no guarantee.
Yeah.
Past performance is actually a much better measure of future performance. And so Apple and companies like that have got incredible Salesforce, incredible track records time and time again, producing really, really good value. I don't have anything against NVIDIA. I think what they're doing is fantastic. But I think that if you're selling picks and shovels to the mining industry, which is the general comparison here, those picks and shovels actually have to mine gold for those miners to have the value that they need to be able to continue to buy picks and shovels. If they are taking those picks and shovels and not finding gold, if those companies that are buying those chips, those CPUs, building infrastructure or stacks to go after this potential, and they do not find that potential, or consumers or businesses are not willing to pay for that potential, then NVIDIA's sales will slow down, and we will have this situation where they peaked up, and then it'll just look like failure. And I feel sorry for them in that sense, because they're not a failure. They're not a business that deserves any kind of how should we say this? They don't need to be beaten by the market. I think they need to be understood that they're doing their best. I think that the fact that Jensen is out there acting like a rock star is probably part of the story. It's a very visible company right now. It's a very visible brand. It's a very visible story. And I think that's exciting, because we're seeing how powerful it can be for a CEO to step into the limelight and do this. And there's lots of ways to do that. You don't have to wear a leather jacket and go out into public. That's one way to do it. I think that Tim Cook is doing it a very different way. And just like there in politics, I always say, people say, well, how do you be a good statesman? I was like, look around. You look at people like Nelson Mandela, who's my favorite statesman of all time. And then you compare him to somebody like Donald Trump. Very, very different characters, different approaches, different language, different way to show up. It's an important distinction to see when you look at CEOs. Is like they're all showing up differently. You can't judge them by this one's doing better than that one, because it's just a neurodiversity of differences that we're looking at.
One of the things I was thinking this week in terms of how companies are distinguishing themselves, they need to have advocates. And I remember thinking with Microsoft, they have Satya, and he does an amazing job. But at the same time, they also have Kevin Scott on the technical side. And during the conference, when you saw Kevin take the stage and just kind of talk to people, not some sort of rehearsed script, but just kind of talk to developers as to what the opportunity was, why Microsoft was in the position to offer them the best solution, that felt real, right? As a technical person, I could connect with that. When I see Brad Smith, and Brad Smith is going country after country, meeting with the leaders in these countries, talking about the Microsoft value and why they should be invested in sovereign AI, and why, again, Microsoft is best positioned for that. You find that these companies have really great ambassadors that they can send out into the market that do a great job for them. And so to your point, sure, it may not always look like the Jensen Huang solution where it's leather jacket on stage, Rockstar event. It can be more subtle. And it'll be interesting to see how Apple navigates that, because what we just don't see with Apple is that visibility. As you're saying, it still feels like everything is happening behind the scenes for this big reveal. And I wonder how that's going to come across.
Well, maybe that's part of their strategy. Maybe they are going to be introducing personalities at the next event and saying, hey, this is our Brad Smith, this is our Kevin, this is our Jensen. These are the people who we want you to start identifying with, so that you can have that personality to personality type of connection. They've done that in the past. They did a really good job with that with people like Johnny Ive and others.
You're right.
So I don't think that they're ignorant to that strategy. I just don't think that that's something that we've had an opportunity to see from them, because they tend to be much more thoughtful and reflective about these things before they put somebody into the limelight. And I think that's great. It's a strategy that's worked for them. I wouldn't would not bet against them.
Yeah. All right. Good. So let's kind of switch gears. There are some exciting and interesting product releases this week that I think people are going to
especially with people. I mean, if you're
exactly
a creative person, oh my God, it's a bonanza of opportunities right now.
So, all right, I'll talk about the ones that I'm excited about. So I saw Udio's new audio upload feature. And for those listening, basically, Udio is a new generative AI audio company. So you can generate music with their platform. They just launched in December. They released their first public product in April, and they are backed by a lot of big names like will.i.am, A16Z. They raised $10 million. And again, these numbers are insane. The timelines are insane from December to April to have your first product to raise in so much money. It is incredible what's happening in the market. But to be fair, they have delivered products that are living up to that valuation. I would say the AI generative music space is really between Udio right now and Suno. And with Udio, you can give a text prompt and it generates a song fully mastered. So you can have lyrics, you can have your vocals, you can have your instrumental. It's impressive. But the new feature, audio upload, allows you, the creator, to upload any type of audio. So maybe it's just like a chord that you want integrated. Maybe it's a part of a song that you were working on previously. And you can then either add it to the beginning of that audio or to the end. You can remix it. It's like audio prompting. And the results are fascinating. It gives you more control, obviously, as a creator, because it's no longer, hey, machine, give me a song and spit it out based on this text. It's, I'm going to create, you're going to create with me, and we're going to kind of jam together and create something awesome.
Yeah, what we're seeing here is probably not surprising to everybody, but I think it's certainly surprising to a lot of the kind of the technorati, and that is the skills that we're going to need in this AI age are verbal and creative. And that was probably a surprise to a lot of the people who were putting their kids through engineering school, saying, learn to program, learn to get good at math, or all these things. I'm not sure that the mathematicians and the engineers are going to have the entirety of this AI cake to themselves.
Yeah.
I think that the creative people, if you're really good with language, if you're really good with words, if you understand how to come up with interesting imagination, like if you've got a great imagination, if you're a writer, for example, or you're somebody who likes to make music or make art, I think this is a really interesting time for you, because the prompts are designed to have that kind of anthropomorphic input. What are you saying? What are you writing? What are you playing? What's the emotion that you're trying to generate here? What's the, and we'll get to this in a second, what's that brand value look like? Right? Yeah. What is the thing that's not necessarily tangible, but is a sense, a feeling of what it is you're going to be creating? And we're seeing this not just at the tactical level of here's how to make a thing, here's how to make a song, or here's how to make a video, or here's how to help me with writing, which, by the way, I am so damn productive these days. I can get so much done with my writing tools in ChatGPT and others, as I know you are. And we should talk a little bit about that one day. Maybe one day we'll have an episode on just how we use AI tools to run Maginative and the other things that we're doing. But we're also starting to see it become part of that productivity layer in B2B sense. Adobe, their Experience Manager platform, which is probably the most popular platform in that space, is starting to also recognize that these things are part of that experience. Like, you're going to have to start to manage those brands, manage the marketing, not without controversy, right? There's some data inputs that we should discuss, but we're starting to see just how important it is to be a creative person, and just how important it is to have mastery of a language. I think that's really the people who went to school to do humanities. Now's your time. This is a really fun time to be alive.
This is your time to shine, right? So you touched on Adobe, and I think we have to spend some time on this. So this week, of course, they released updates to their AEP, Customer Experience Management product, and it now has an assistant built in that can do really fascinating things with natural language. So if you need to generate reports, if you need to get data, it's just a matter of asking. It doesn't require that technical barrier to entry. It doesn't have that technical barrier to entry that it once did. And so anyone can really participate in terms of messaging and bringing the brand in front of the market. But one of the interesting things that happened that overshadowed all of this week was that Adobe updated their terms of use. And it basically started to
include... You mean they got the lawyers involved and things went to shit?
I know, right? Like it was all going well until the lawyers showed up. And basically the language read as if, well, we're going to have access to your content, and you are going to give us the rights to use and to license. You're going to sub-license that content to us so that we can share it, right? And that freaked out a lot of people. They were looking at their Photoshop terms and they were thinking, whoa. We are working on things that may have NDAs, but this is also just my private content. What do you mean that you need to have access to it? And they've since come out to clarify that, but the damage was already done, right? What are your thoughts on what's going on with Adobe and this messaging issue?
Yeah, there's two big issues here. One is that there is an issue and one that there isn't an issue. I don't know how many people have actually read the terms of service of anything that they've bought in the last 20 years. But you don't have any privacy. Privacy is a complete myth. The fact that you think you have any kind of control over your IP is probably very mythological, at least at the individual level. I think the second part is that if you're a business, there are bigger problems to solve. A few years ago, I did a really big deal with an unnamed but very, very, very large agency that owns a number of other agencies. Yeah. And what I was able to show them is that the software that they were using, an Adobe product, was also being used individually. In other words, the employees of the company were using that software in their personal capacity on their personal machines at home. In other words, there was client data, client IP, we're talking some of the biggest banks in the world, that was sitting on individuals' home computers without any kind of protection.
Yep.
Now, when I was able to show that data to the chief data officer, there was a very awkward silence in the room. And so I think what we're dealing with here is nothing new. It's been ongoing for a very long time. The problem isn't necessarily the terms and service of Adobe. The problem is, where does that data actually sit in your organization? And what companies really need to ask themselves is, who has access to these tools and where are they getting access to it? Because if they've got a personal laptop or a machine at home and they're able to create an individual account but somehow include the client IP, that's when you're going to have a problem.
Yeah,
I think that's where the chief data officers and the chief information officers are probably having sleepless nights. It's not so much that Adobe are going to steal your data, because it really doesn't have any benefit to them to steal your data.
Exactly.
But what really is the problem is that individuals are not necessarily conscious of the fact that their behavior, well intended, I'm sure, is a security risk. And so who wants to do that boring security training? Who wants to do that necessary onboarding when you join a company to do the security training? You kind of click through and you're just like, oh yeah, I've got it. But the reality is that is the weakest link, not Adobe.
As you're talking, I'm thinking back, and a couple months ago, Slack had a similar issue, right? Somebody looked at Slack's terms of use and they're like, oh, Slack is training their AI on all our conversations. And Slack was like, no, we've been doing that for years. This sort of training is to put emojis into your chat that are like having the right context. It has nothing to do with like generative AI and those models. And then even Microsoft recently with their new recall feature in Windows, people are like, whoa, you can't be taking screenshots of this, even if it's on my device. That's my privacy that you're invading. And I do wonder if this privacy, as you're saying, is an illusion, because even for the people that herald Apple as the kings of privacy, Apple has all of your data, right? Like Apple has access to all of it and they gate it from advertisers, but Apple still does have it. And I remember there was once a time a friend of mine was trying to send a message and he kept on sending a message and the message wouldn't arrive. And it turned out that Apple was blocking that message from being sent because it had scanned the message and somehow flagged it as something that they didn't want to be sent. But again, like, sure, it's your device, it's your content, but these companies are going to want to protect themselves. And you see that even with the AI models today, where you they will scan your messages in order to ensure that you're not doing anything dangerous. And so, yes, there is privacy, and then there is privacy, right? So it did turn out to be a case where for Adobe, they clarified that they need to have this because they need to scan content to see if there's anything illegal, like child pornography and things like that, that they need to work with federal agencies to monitor. Also, if you need to share that content with somebody else, they need to have the rights to access that content to make it shareable.
Yeah.
And
hey, look, if you're training an LLM,
yeah,
you've got to give it something, right? Do I stop talking to my children because they're going to have IP from me to them and then eventually go and share that with somebody else? I mean, that is the way that the world works. Richard Dawkins, who's one of my favorite authors, he's an evolutionist and a geneticist who's written a lot. The Selfish Gene is probably his most famous book.
Right.
But he talks about this, he was the guy who invented the concept of memes. Right? So memes are not like silly things that you see on Instagram. Yeah. Memes are ideas that get transferred from generation to generation in the same way that genes get transferred from generation to generation. And really good genes tend to have an interaction with other good genes in order to create this recombination, which causes the positive and negative outcomes that we see in mutations. And that is how evolution works. Memes are no different. Ideas meeting ideas. And as Richard Dawkins says, when two ideas come together with each other and have sex with each other, there is a recombinating of something that could be incredibly good. Mm-hmm. Of course, it could be negative, but what we're asking these LLMs to do is say, learn, and then come up with better ideas, right? Or come up with ways that we can solve this problem in more efficient manners. And so we are going to have to get used to the idea that if we're going to share and we're going to create, then that is the whole point of this thing. Yeah. Where I'm super interested in where Adobe's taking this is much more around that idea that they can assist you in doing your work better. I think we're seeing this with Asana and Copilot, and almost just about every major product now has some kind of Copilot feature or assistant feature. This is where the true value of this is. I'm going to share a certain amount of my work. I'm going to share my IP. I'm going to share my process. And you're going to help me make that better. You're going to help me make that more efficient through either recommendations, kind of at the surface level, but even better, you're going to help me design a workflow that's going to optimize behavior. And where we see true transformation, and for those of you who don't know, I've held positions in companies where I'm the transformation person within the organization. True transformation happens when there's behavior change, not when there's a new mission statement stapled to the wall, right? You need to see change in the way that people show up to do a certain thing. And so that practice or that behavior is certainly the thing that we're looking to AI to help. I don't think AI is responsible for the change, but I think AI is responsible for giving us better and easier ways to make those changes happen. That's not to say change is not ever going to be difficult. It's always going to be difficult in some sense. But I think AI is going to provide us with workflow that says, you know what? Based on your organization's mission, based on your OKRs, based on your KPIs, here's a better way to work. Here's a way to get where you need to go. Or as a reminder, focus on these things because these things are ultimately going to generate the outcomes that you're looking for. Or here's an experiment to run to get the solutions you're looking for. I think that's really exciting. I haven't seen the level that I'm talking at yet, but I'm starting to see the kind of the early stages of that, saying like, hey, this is a better workflow for you. Here's an interesting way to do the things you want to do. And we're seeing it embedded directly into those products. Like you open up your Google Workplace and you start working, and the assistant immediately pops up and says, hey, there's a way that I can help you here. And I think that's interesting.
more than anything else, what this new era represents is a change in our relationship with technology. And I think it's going to be important as a society that we, one, start thinking about what we want this change to be, so that maybe it can be a little bit more controlled and deliberate compared to what happened with like social media and the smartphone. But
anything's better than social media. Hopefully we've learned our lesson.
Exactly, right? And so I think our relationship with our data and our privacy, these are going to change as our relationship with the technology itself changes. What that looks like, I don't know. There are obviously ethical concerns like provenance concerns, IP concerns, lots of issues that need to be solved. And I think that's where the conversation needs to really go. I see a lot of conversations still even this week around like AI taking over the world and the doomsday scenario still. And it's like, well, that's great, but we do have these practical challenges that we need to start thinking of. And so to wrap up, I want to just point out a couple of things. As Richard mentioned, you saw solutions this week from Asana, from eBay, from Google with NotebookLM. Go to Maginative.com. You will find a lot of other stories that you can dive into, that you can check out. The one story that I wanted to just touch on at the end is from China. Kuaishou unveiled a new video AI model called Kling that competes with Sora. It's a text-to-video model. You put in some text and it generates some video. And these are getting really good. Their realism is great.
Amazing.
And I'm going to just pause for viewers on YouTube that are seeing this. I'm going to show you some examples right now. That way you can really appreciate just what we're saying. Now, the cool thing is, again, great technology. What I love that they're doing is that this is integrated into their app. And for those that don't know, Kuaishou basically is a TikTok in China. They do short form videos, and now they've integrated this technology directly in the app so you can generate video content. And for me, the question is always, okay, the tech is great, but how does it translate? Like, am I going to be just generating videos and sharing it with my friends? Maybe that's a relationship and a behavioral change that's going to happen down the road. Or do we still need that Apple to come along to be like, oh, I like this, but this is how it needs to be implemented as a solution?
It definitely needs to be. It definitely needs some kind of watermark or some way to like define, like, oh, that's that, and this is something else. Because, I mean, even so, this week in Boston, the Celtics played the Mavs, and there was kind of a big game. And immediately after the game, there's a whole bunch of AI generated, press interviews with players saying stuff that you would be like, whoa, like at first glance, you're like, I cannot believe this is actually happening. And then of course, the penny drops and you go, oh, it's AI.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's not before 10,000 comments haven't been added from people. So,
he said, what?
I think, yeah, exactly. So that's just a silly sports example. We're in an election year. I think that what we expect to see with these things, that has to, there needs to be some way to know what you're watching. If there's a presidential debate and the next day you see some fake AI thing, where one of the presidential candidates is running the mouth off about something. It's very, very difficult to discern. And I think this is not new news. We've talked about this before, but I think we're starting to see these technologies get so good. It's going to be incredibly difficult for even the smartest of us to understand what it is that we're looking at and what's real and what's not. So it's just going to get, today's the least complicated day of our life.
So here's what I want to leave everyone with then. At the start of the show, we spoke about Udio and how you're starting to see AI integrated into the creative process. And so let's say you're a creator and you create a new song and it was AI assisted. There are certain parts of the song in the creative process that the AI helped you to create. How do you represent AI's role in that versus like Kling, where you generate a video with AI and you put it out there in the world? How do we as a society come to terms in terms of processing that AI was used in both of these? Maybe one needs to be labeled that, hey, this is fake, It's an AI.
Yeah, I mean, there's precedent for this. I don't think it's a difficult conversation. There's precedent. If there's something's trademarked or it's registered, it's got a mark on it.
Right.
If something's like a cigarette, it's bad for you. It's got a government warning on it. We've covered this problem before in just about every other, like nutritional labels on things. Alcohol. Everything has got either a stamp or a badge or a mark on it that says, "Hey, this is a thing." This should be no different. Social media should be no different. Hey, social media is like, this is social media. It should be, this is AI. This is not, wasn't, a recorded thing. We've done this before. This shouldn't be that difficult. I think the problem is that Silicon Valley and a lot of the kind of the tech broness that are associated with that is saying, like, oh, we're the good guys. Let us regulate ourselves. We're just going to regulate, our industry. Well, it didn't work. We need regulators. We need to regulate every industry.
Let me push back, because I do think we're at this point now where, with AI's role increasing across the stack in a few years, everything is going to have AI augmentation somewhere.
That's okay. Everything's got a trademark. Everything's got some kind of IP connected to it.
So if everything then says, oh, this is AI, how do you distinguish between things that are fake, meaning what they represent is not reality, and that's an entirely different conversation, versus this was created, it's real, but it was created with the help of AI still. And I think that's the question.
I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to even guess at how to do that from a legal point of view. But I will say that I don't think these are new problems. I think these are problems that have existed for a long time. In fact, the invention of money is really just, if you look at money, it's it's a promissory note. Coins were stamped with the head of the king to say, look, the king says this thing is real, versus that piece of crap that somebody else made down the road.
All right.
These are not new problems. I think the problem, like I said, and I'll reiterate, the problem is that AI and tech in general, especially social media, says that they are regulating themselves and that they don't need somebody else to come in and put their mark on it. And I think that's the problem. Right. I think that's where we're going to run into trouble. So I'm going to end on that note. I'm going to celebrate my birthday. Hey. Thank you again for a wonderful conversation, and I'll see you next week.
Yes, everyone, thank you for joining us. As always, Richard, fascinating conversations with you. If you don't know, check out Maginative.com for more stories. Subscribe to us here on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up and a like. We always appreciate the support. But as always, enjoy the weekend. Until next time, one love.